I never thought I'd be telling this story. 22 years of marriage, and here I am, Jack Turner, sitting in the house I built with my own hands, trying to make sense of how it all fell apart. But maybe I should start at the beginning, back when Melissa and I were just two kids trying to make it in this world. We met at Murphy's Diner on Route 47, the kind of place where the coffee's always hot and the pie's always yesterday's. She was working the night shift. Her business textbook spread across the back counter between orders. I'd come in after pulling a 14-hour day laying foundation for the new shopping center. My hands were cracked and bleeding despite the work gloves, and she noticed. "You need to take better care of those," she said, bringing me a bowl of warm water and soap without my asking. Hands like that, they tell a story. Might as well make it a good one. That was Melissa, always seeing the bigger picture, always thinking ahead. I fell for her right there, between the smell of bacon grease and the fluorescent buzz of those old lights. 6 months later, we were married at the courthouse, her in a simple white dress from Target, me in my father's old suit that didn't quite fit right. Those early years were something else. I worked construction during the day and picked up handyman jobs on weekends. Every dollar that didn't go to rent or food went to Melissa's education. She was going for her business degree, determined to climb out of the working-class neighborhood we'd grown up in. I admired that about her, that hunger for something more. When she graduated, I surprised her with the deed to a quarter-acre lot on Maple Street. It wasn't much, just a patch of earth with some old oak trees, but it was ours. I spent the next year building our house, working nights and weekends, learning as I went. Every stud I placed, every nail I drove, was a promise to her that we were building something permanent. The day we moved in, Melissa cried. She ran her hands along the custom cabinets I'd built, traced the grain of the hardwood floors I'd laid myself. "You did this for us," she kept saying. "You built this with your own hands. We made the decision not to have kids early on. It wasn't that we didn't want them exactly, but we wanted to build our life first." Melissa had her career ambitions, and I had dreams of starting my own construction crew. Kids would have complicated things, and we were already complicated enough, two people from nothing trying to become something. For 15 years, it worked. Melissa climbed the corporate ladder at Hammond Industries while I built my reputation as a craftsman. My crew grew from just me and a pickup truck to 6 guys in a fleet of vehicles. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. More importantly, we were proud of each other. The shift was so gradual, I almost missed it. It started when Melissa got promoted to regional manager 3 years ago. The company bought her a new wardrobe, designer suits that cost more than I made in a week. She started going to conferences, corporate retreats, networking events. At first, she'd come home bubbling with excitement, telling me about the deals she'd closed, the executives she'd impressed, but somewhere along the line, her stories changed. Instead of we, it became I. Instead of coming home excited, she'd come home exhausted, pouring herself wine before even taking off her heels. She started correcting my grammar at dinner, suggesting I read books on professional development. When the Johnsons next door complimented the deck I'd built them, Melissa would smile tightly and change the subject. "Maybe you should update your wardrobe," she suggested one night, going through my closet with a critical eye. "You never know when we might need to attend a company function." That should have been my first real warning sign. In 20 years, she'd never cared what I wore. But I wrote it off as stress from her position. Then came the invitation to Hammond Industries' annual gala. She mentioned it casually over breakfast, almost as an afterthought while scrolling through her phone. "The company gala is next month. Spouses are welcome to attend." The way she said it, welcome to attend, like I was some optional accessory. "Of course I'll be there," I replied, spreading jam on my toast. She looked up from her phone, something unreadable in her expression. "You don't have to come if you're not comfortable. I know these events aren't really your thing." "My wife's big company party?" "I'll be there," I assured her. She went shopping the next day and came back with a suit for me. $800, no discussion, no asking my size or preference. I should have recognized the warning signs when she bought me that suit without asking what I wanted. But I was still foolish enough to believe she wanted me there. The suit Melissa bought me cost $800. I know because I saw the receipt she'd tried to hide in her purse. $800 for something I'd wear once, maybe twice. The fabric felt foreign against my skin, too smooth, too perfect. My hands, calloused from years of honest work, kept catching on the delicate material. "Stop fidgeting," Melissa said, adjusting my tie for the third time. She stepped back, examining me like I was one of her quarterly reports. "And remember, when people ask what you do, say you run a construction firm. Not that you're a contractor." "Same thing, isn't it?" I asked. She gave me that look, the one that had been appearing more frequently. Part pity, part frustration. "It's about presentation, Jack. These people, they respond to certain language." The Grand Meridian Hotel stood like a glass monument to excess in the heart of downtown. Valet parking, red carpet, the whole production. I watched Melissa transform the moment we stepped through those doors. Her posture straightened, her smile became something practiced and gleaming. Even her voice changed, dropping into a lower, more authoritative register. "Melissa, you look absolutely stunning. A woman in a dress that probably cost more than my truck rushed over, air-kissing my wife's cheeks. Catherine, you remember my husband Jack," Melissa said. The pause before husband was barely noticeable, but I caught it. Catherine's eyes swept over me, her smile freezing slightly. "Of course. You're in construction, right?" "He runs his own firm," Melissa interjected before I could answer. "Blue-collar entrepreneurship. It's quite charming, really. Charming. Like I was some exotic pet she'd brought to show and tell." The ballroom was a sea of suits and evening gowns, champagne flutes catching the light from massive chandeliers. I recognized some faces from Melissa's stories, the accounts she managed, the departments she coordinated with. But seeing them here, in their element, I realized I'd never really understood her world. "There's Richard," Melissa said, her entire demeanor shifting. I followed her gaze to a man holding court near the bar. Richard Hale, her boss. I'd heard his name 1,000 times over the past 2 years since he'd joined the company, but this was our first meeting. He was everything I wasn't. Tall, lean, with silver hair that looked professionally styled and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Richard, I'd like you to meet my husband Jack," she said. This time, she didn't pause before husband, but something in her tone made it sound like an apology. Richard's handshake was firm but brief, his attention already shifting back to Melissa. "The famous Jack. Melissa's told us so much about you. Construction, right? Good, honest work. The backbone of America," he said with a tone that dripped condescension. "That's right," I replied, keeping my voice level. "I build things that last." "How refreshing," he responded, already turning back to Melissa. "Someone who works with their hands." Throughout the evening, I endured variations of the same theme. "Must be nice not to deal with corporate politics," one executive mused. "I bet you don't take your work home with you," another added with a knowing smile. But what killed me wasn't their dismissal. I'd dealt with that before. It was watching Melissa not only allow it but participate in it. She laughed at their jokes about real men and simple pleasures. When someone asked about our house, she mentioned I'd built it myself, but quickly added, "Of course, we're thinking of hiring a real architect for the renovation." "We've never discussed any renovation," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Oh, Jack," she laughed, touching my arm dismissively. "We've talked about updating the kitchen for years. We hadn't, not once." I watched her with Richard, noting things I'd been too blind to see before. How she knew he preferred Macallan 18 to Glenlivet. How she laughed at his stories before the punchline, already knowing them by heart. How her hand lingered on his arm when making a point. How she positioned herself always within his line of sight, even when talking to others. "Your wife is quite the asset," a man named Isaac told me during dinner. "Richard says he doesn't know what he'd do without her." "I bet he doesn't," I replied, watching them across the room. Melissa was whispering something in Richard's ear, her hand on his shoulder. He threw his head back, laughing, his hand briefly touching her waist. "They make a good team," Isaac continued, oblivious to my tone. "Some partnerships just work, you know." Chemistry. The evening dragged on. Awards were given, speeches made, deals celebrated. I stood on the periphery, a ghost at my own wife's party, watching her navigate this world with an ease that made our life together seem like a rough draft she'd finally edited out. During the CEO's speech about corporate family and valued partnerships, I noticed Melissa and Richard had disappeared. I found them on the terrace, heads close together over his phone, her finger pointing at something on the screen. Innocent enough except for the way she was pressed against his side, the way his arm draped around her waist with casual ownership. "There you are," I said, stepping onto the terrace. They didn't jump apart. That would have been too obvious. Instead, Melissa slowly shifted away, her movement deliberate and controlled. "Jack, we were just reviewing the Alexander projection," she explained. "On a Saturday night?" "At a party?" I asked. "Big deals don't wait for business hours," Richard said smoothly. "Your wife understands that. She's got killer instincts." "Among other things, I'm sure," I replied. Richard's smile tightened. "I think I hear them calling for the raffle inside," he said, touching Melissa's elbow. "Shall we?" They walked past me, Melissa avoiding my eyes. I needed air, needed space to process what my wife had become. I never imagined what I'd see when I looked back through those windows would destroy everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The terrace air was cool against my flushed face. Below, the city sprawled in neat grids of light, organized and predictable, everything my life no longer was. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes, trying to reconcile the woman inside with the girl who'd bandaged my hands all those years ago at Murphy's Diner. The music had shifted to something slower, romantic. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the dance floor filling with couples. That's when I spotted them, Melissa and Richard, moving toward the center of the floor like they owned it. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Of course she'd dance with her boss. It was corporate politics, keeping the higher-ups happy. I'd watched her play these games before, though never quite like this. Richard's hand rested on the small of her back, perfectly appropriate. Melissa's hand on his shoulder, nothing wrong there, but then I really watched them. The way their bodies moved in perfect synchronization, like they'd done this before, many times before. The way she looked up at him, her face showing an expression I hadn't seen in years. Genuine joy, unguarded attraction. The way he whispered something that made her throw her head back in laughter, exposing her throat. Richard's hand began to drift lower. Still watching from the terrace, I waited for Melissa to step back, to subtly redirect his hand to a more appropriate position. She was always so conscious of appearances, after all. Instead, she moved closer, her body molding against his. The song shifted to something with a Latin beat. Other couples struggled with the rhythm, laughing at their clumsy attempts. But Melissa and Richard moved like professionals, his hands guiding her through turns and dips with practiced ease. When had she learned to dance like that? In 22 years, she'd never once danced with me that way. That's when it happened. Richard spun her out, then pulled her back against him, her back to his chest. His hands slid down her sides, ostensibly guiding her hips to the rhythm. But then his right hand kept going, sliding over the curve of her ass and squeezing. Not a brush, not an accident. A deliberate, possessive grab. Time stopped. I waited for her outrage. For her to step away, slap him, make a scene. Instead, she pressed back against him, her own hand reaching back to pull him closer. In front of everyone. In front of 200 of their colleagues and their spouses. Like I didn't exist. Like I wasn't standing right there watching my entire world implode. The cold clarity that descended on me was almost peaceful. 22 years of marriage reduced to this moment. Every sacrifice, every late night I'd worked to pay for her education, every dream I'd deferred so she could chase hers. All of it meaningless. I didn't remember moving through the crowd. One moment I was on the terrace, the next I was yanking Richard away from my wife. He stumbled backward, champagne spilling from someone's glass. A woman shrieking in surprise. "What the hell?" Richard started. But my fist connected with his jaw before he could finish. He went down hard, his expensive suit offering no protection against the marble floor. I should have stopped there. The rational part of my brain, the part that had built a successful business, that had navigated 22 years of marriage, told me to stop. But then Melissa screamed, "Jack, no! What are you doing?" Her concern was for him. Not for our marriage, not for what I'd witnessed, but for the man who'd just publicly groped her. I hauled Richard up by his collar and hit him again. His nose exploded in a fountain of blood, spattering his white dress shirt. Someone was screaming for security. Melissa was pulling at my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "You're ruining everything," she shrieked. "You're destroying my career." Her career. Not our marriage. Her career. I let Richard drop to the floor where he curled into a fetal position, blood pooling beneath his face. The crowd had formed a circle around us, phones out, recording everything. Good. Let them document this moment. Let them all see what Melissa Turner had become. "We're done," I told her, my voice carrying in the sudden silence. 22 years, and we're done. "Jack, please, let's discuss this," she started, reaching for me. "Discuss what?" "How long you've been f***ing him. How many of these people knew before I did?" I gestured at the crowd. Several people looked away, unable to meet my eyes. That's what I thought. Security arrived, 4 men in black suits moving toward me. I raised my hands, showing I was done. Richard was moaning on the floor, someone calling for an ambulance. Melissa stood there in her designer dress, a tear in the fabric where she'd caught it trying to pull me away, her carefully styled hair in disarray, her lipstick smeared. "Sir, we need you to leave," the head of security said. "Already going," I replied, straightening my $800 suit jacket. I turned to Melissa one last time. "Find your own way home. Maybe Richard can give you a ride when he gets out of the hospital." The last thing I saw as the elevator doors closed was my wife kneeling beside her boss, using cocktail napkins to stop the bleeding, while 200 of Dallas's corporate elite watched and whispered. I left her there with her broken boss and her shattered reputation, but that was just the beginning of what she was about to lose. The locksmith arrived at 11 p.m., an hour after I got home. Tony Garza, one of my subcontractors, didn't ask questions when I called. That's the thing about blue-collar relationships. We show up for each other, no explanations needed. "All of them?" he asked, looking at the doors. "Every lock. Front, back, garage. And install the security bolts I've been putting off," I instructed. While Tony worked, I methodically went through the house, documenting everything with my phone. Our joint bank accounts, investment statements, the house deed, insurance policies, 22 years of financial entanglement spread across the dining room table I'd built for our 5th anniversary. At midnight, I called Henry Carter, an attorney I'd met through a construction arbitration case. Henry had mentioned once that he handled divorces too. "The ugly ones," he'd said with a grim smile. "Jack? It's late. Everything okay?" He answered on the 3rd ring. "I need a divorce attorney. Tonight, if possible." "I'll pay emergency rates," I said. There was a pause. "How bad?" he asked. "Public infidelity. 200 witnesses. Her boss is probably in the ER with a broken nose," I explained. "I'll be at my office in 30 minutes," he replied without hesitation. By the time Melissa arrived home at 2:47 a.m., I was prepared. I watched through the security camera as she tried her key, confusion turning to rage as she realized it didn't work. The pounding started immediately. "Jack, open this door right now! This is my house too!" she yelled through the door. I opened the door but didn't unlock the security chain. She stood there, mascara streaked, her designer dress still torn, blood, Richard's blood staining the fabric. "Let me in," she said, her voice shifting from demanding to pleading. "We need to talk. We can talk through the chain." "How long?" I asked. "What?" she responded, confused. "How long have you been intimate with him?" I clarified. She straightened, the corporate executive returning. "It's not what you think. That dance, it didn't mean anything. Richard had too much to drink," she started. "Stop," I interrupted, pulling out my phone and showing her the video someone had already posted online. It has 30,000 views already. The caption says, "CEO gropes employee at company gala while her husband watches. Want to try again?" Her face crumbled. "Jack, please. You don't understand how things work in my world. These relationships, they're complicated," she pleaded. "No, they're not. You're married. He grabbed your ass. You liked it. Pretty simple," I countered. "That's just how business works at this level." "You wouldn't understand," she protested. "You're right. I don't understand how spreading your legs for your boss is a business strategy," I shot back. The slap she tried to deliver was blocked by the door chain. "How dare you? After everything I've done for us, for our future," she raged. "What future? The one where you leave me for him once his divorce is final." "Oh, did you think I didn't know about his divorce? You talk in your sleep, Melissa. Richard says this. Richard thinks that. I've been listening to you dream about him for months, I revealed. She shifted tactics, tears flowing freely now. 22 years, Jack. Doesn't that mean anything? She sobbed. It meant everything to me. But apparently it was just your rough draft. I saw the revision tonight. The one where you're the corporate queen and I'm the embarrassing first husband you had to tolerate, I replied coldly. I'll take half of everything, she threatened, the tears stopping as quickly as they'd started. The house, your business, all of it. Actually, you won't, I informed her, holding up the folder Henry had prepared. Texas is an at-fault divorce state. Adultery affects the settlement. And that prenup you signed? The one you said we'd never need? It's ironclad. You get what you brought into the marriage, which was student debt I paid off, and a minimal settlement. You've already seen a lawyer? It's been 3 hours, she exclaimed in disbelief. Amazing what you can accomplish when you're properly motivated. Henry Carter, by the way. You might recognize the name. He handled the Costello divorce. Remember? The one where the cheating spouse got nothing? I said. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it, her face paling. I've been suspended pending investigation, she whispered. That was fast. I guess having intimacy with the boss is still frowned upon, even in your sophisticated world, I observed. You've ruined me, she said quietly. No, Melissa, you ruined yourself. I just pulled back the curtain. Your things will be packed in boxes in the garage tomorrow. Pick them up between 9 and noon. I won't be here, I stated firmly. Where am I supposed to go tonight? She asked desperately. Not my problem. Maybe Richard has a couch you can use. Oh, wait, he's probably still in the hospital, I replied, closing the door. I closed the door on her protests, on 22 years of marriage, on the woman I'd once loved more than anything. Through the window, I watched her call someone, her sister probably, and wait for a ride. Melissa thought she could threaten me with lawyers and settlements. She had no idea I'd already spoken to the best divorce attorney in the city, and he was very interested in our case. Henry Carter's office occupied the top floor of a building I'd helped construct 10 years ago. Funny how life circles back. He poured me coffee from a French press while laying out documents across his conference table. The video went viral, he said, turning his laptop toward me. Local news picked it up. Corporate scandal at Hammond Industries Gala. Your wife is famous. Ex-wife, I corrected, soon enough. Here's what we have. Public adultery with 200 witnesses, several of whom have already reached out offering statements. The prenup is solid. I reviewed it last night. She was represented by counsel when she signed it, so she can't claim ignorance, he explained. What about Richard's assault charges? I asked. Henry actually smiled. That's the beautiful part. I made some calls. Richard Hale has a history. 3 different women have filed HR complaints against him over the past 5 years, all buried with settlements and NDAs. But NDAs don't apply to criminal proceedings. If he pushes assault charges, we counter with assault. You were defending your wife from unwanted advances, he said. She wanted them, I pointed out. He doesn't know you know that. Besides, the video shows him groping her first. You reacted as any reasonable husband would, Henry countered. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. They fired me. Are you happy now? Henry read it over my shoulder. Actually, that helps us. She can't claim financial hardship in the divorce if she was terminated for cause. Document everything, he advised. Over the next 3 weeks, the dominoes fell in sequence. Hammond Industries, facing a PR nightmare, conducted a thorough investigation. They discovered Richard had been using company funds for business dinners with Melissa at hotels. The forensic accountant they hired found a pattern going back 18 months. 18 months of lies. Richard's assault charges were dropped after his lawyer saw our evidence and understood the countersuit we'd file. His wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, reached out to me through Henry, offering her own testimony about finding receipts for jewelry that she never received. We compared dates. Every conference Melissa attended in the last year and a half aligned with purchases Richard made. The divorce proceedings were almost anticlimactic. Melissa showed up with a lawyer she could barely afford, trying to argue that the prenup shouldn't apply because she'd contributed to building the business. Henry destroyed that argument with a simple question. Can you show any direct investment, labor or documented contribution to Turner Construction? She couldn't, because there wasn't any. While I was building our life with my hands, she was building her career on her back. The judge awarded me the house and my business intact. Melissa received $30,000, essentially the statutory minimum in Texas for a marriage of our length when adultery is proven. She had 30 days to vacate the house. "This isn't fair," she said after the ruling. 22 years and I get nothing? You got an education I paid for, I reminded her. You got a career I supported. You got a house to live in that I built. What you didn't get was Richard, because he's too busy trying to save his own ass to care about yours. The real satisfaction came from unexpected sources. 3 of Melissa's former colleagues reached out to apologize for the gala night. "We knew something was going on," one admitted over coffee. "We should have said something." "Not your responsibility," I told him. Hammond Industries implemented new workplace relationship policies, specifically citing the recent incident as a catalyst for change. Richard was quietly transferred to their Phoenix office, a demotion disguised as a lateral move. His LinkedIn profile no longer mentioned his MBA from Wharton or his executive leadership role. He was just another middle manager now, his reputation destroyed by his own arrogance. Melissa applied to dozens of companies, but the story had spread too far. HR departments Googled candidates now, and her name brought up the video, the scandal, the investigation findings. She finally took a job at a small logistics company in Oklahoma, making a third of her previous salary. The last time I saw her was when she came to get her things. She stood in the garage, looking at the boxes I'd packed, each one labeled with ruthless efficiency. Kitchen items, not built by Jack. Clothes, purchased with corporate salary. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. I loved you, she said quietly. You loved the idea of leaving me behind, I corrected. You just wanted to secure the replacement first. She loaded her car in silence. As she drove away, I noticed she was driving a used Honda, not the Mercedes she'd leased before. The plates were from Oklahoma. The papers were signed, the house was mine, and Melissa was finally out of my life. But the real satisfaction came from knowing that sometimes the quiet man everyone underestimates holds all the power. 6 months. That's all it took for 22 years to become a distant memory. I'm sitting on the deck I built, the same one Melissa used to be embarrassed by, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rust. My coffee's gone cold, but I don't mind. These days, I've learned to appreciate the temperature of things. The house is different now. Not structurally, every beam, every joint is still solid, but it feels different. Lighter somehow, like I've stripped away old paint to find good wood underneath. I replaced our bed, donated the dining room set she'd picked out, and turned her home office into a workshop. The smell of sawdust has replaced her perfume, and I prefer it that way. Henry called yesterday with an update. Melissa's living in Tulsa now, working as an operations coordinator for a trucking company. $52,000 a year, no company car, no expense account. She shares an apartment with another divorcee she met through a support group. The irony isn't lost on me. She's back to the life she was so desperate to escape. Richard fared worse. The Phoenix transfer lasted 3 months before Hammond Industries quietly let him go with a minimal severance package. Last Henry heard, Richard was consulting independently, which is corporate speak for unemployed, with a LinkedIn profile. His ex-wife got the house in their divorce, along with most of their assets. Turns out judges don't look favorably on executives who use company funds to finance affairs. Turner Construction, on the other hand, is thriving. Word spread about what happened. The blue-collar community is small and talks. But instead of hurting business, it helped it. Clients respected that I'd stood up for myself, that I'd built something solid enough to survive a storm. We've taken on 3 major commercial projects in the last quarter alone. Last month, I hired 2 new crews and promoted Tony Garza to foreman. You sure about this? He'd asked when I offered him the position. I don't have a degree. Neither do I reminded him. But we've got something better. We know how to build things that last. I've been seeing someone new. Sarah owns the lumber yard where I buy materials. She's nothing like Melissa. Doesn't care about corporate ladders or designer clothes. She wears steel-toed boots to dinner and has sawdust in her hair more often than not. When I told her about building this house, she asked to see the plans I'd drawn up, genuinely interested in the joinery techniques I'd used. "You built this yourself?" she'd asked, running her hands along the crown molding in the living room. "Every inch," I confirmed. "That's incredibly romantic," she said, then caught herself. "Sorry, given what happened, that's probably—" "No," I interrupted. "It is romantic. I built it with love. Just turned out to be the wrong recipient. We don't go to galas or corporate events. Instead, we attend trade shows and builders' conventions." She doesn't correct my grammar or suggest I dress differently. When her friends ask what I do, she says, "He builds things that matter," and means it. The other day, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Melissa. "I'm sorry," was all it said. I didn't respond. Not out of anger, that's long gone, but because there was nothing to say. She'd chosen her path, I'd chosen mine. The difference was I'd built mine on solid foundation while she'd built hers on sand. Looking back, I understand what happened. Melissa wasn't evil, just lost. She'd confused climbing with growing, advancement with achievement. She'd seen my contentment as complacency, my satisfaction as settling. In trying to become something more, she'd become something less. I kept one photo from our marriage, our wedding day at the courthouse. Not for nostalgia, but as a reminder. In it, we're both smiling, genuinely happy, unaware of how differently we'd defined success. I was holding her hand with the same hands that would build our house, that would build my business, that would eventually defend what I'd created. Melissa once told me I was too boring for someone like her. She was right about one thing: I am boring. I show up, I do the work, I keep my word, and I treat people with respect. In the end, boring outlasted flashy, and I was left with everything that truly mattered: my dignity, my home, and the knowledge that I never have to pretend to be someone else again. The sun's almost down now, the sky shifting to purple. Sarah's coming over for dinner. Nothing fancy, just steaks on the grill and beer in bottles, not champagne flutes. We'll sit on this deck I built, under the pergola I installed last month, and talk about real things. Tomorrow I'll wake up in the house I constructed, drive to the business I created, and continue building a life that no one can take away. That's the thing about working with your hands. You learn that the only things worth having are the things you build yourself. Melissa never understood that. She thought success was something you took, something you climbed toward, something you achieved by stepping on others. But real success? Real success is simpler than that. It's building something solid enough to weather any storm, true enough that you never have to lie about it, and strong enough that when someone tries to tear it down, they only destroy themselves. I built my life with these hands, and these hands, scarred and calloused as they are still building. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.